I'm fascinated by Jalen Milroe. Like, I'm all in.
Oh, my God.
I think he's going to be so fun.
Okay, what did you make? So I do want to talk about Zabel. I want to talk about Eamon Worry, but obviously we got to bring up the fact you draft a quarterback. That's ultimately going to be who we're going to talk about right here. I really, really liked the pick. I never, ever, ever would have liked Jalen Milroe were he drafted with a single pick sooner than that. And I don't mean like one before when Seattle took him. I mean with one of the picks that they used on their first three players. I would have thought that's way too early for that. I really, really like him where they drafted him. Not only that, but I thought he'd go a little earlier in round 2 because I thought Shedeur would be off the board.
Right.
I thought that we'd see, the Steelers, the Raiders, the Browns get a little more involved in the race for a quarterback earlier in the second round. That being said, the athletic upside is crazy high with Milroe, and selfishly, I've never covered a real quarterback controversy here in Seattle.
Oh, it's fun.
I'm a little jealous.
Well, and if you go back and kind of remember how it all went down in 2012, the Seahawks, had let Hasselbeck go the year earlier. They had spent some time with Tavares Jackson, who I think we knew was probably going to return. Mm-hmm. And then they signed Matt Flynn. And I remember everybody, they've got their quarterback. They've signed him long term. This is the guy. And I remember thinking, like, did they? It's like 1 year guaranteed. Like, there's not a lot of like, hey, commitment here to Matt Flynn. We talked about it like this might be the guy, but Tavares is still out there and they could still draft someone. And then Brock and I spent a lot of time still, even after that, talking about Russell Wilson specifically, but some other guys in that draft. Then they draft Russ in the third round. I mean, you can't help but come up with the comps here, right? Drew Lock returns to play the Tavares Jackson role. Obviously, Sam Darnold is squarely in the Matt Flynn role here where, it's a big deal, but it's really only one season guaranteed. Yep. And then you draft a guy in the third round who can run, who's accurate, who can throw the deep ball. Like, man, that's like Russ 2.0, except he's a better runner.
I will say a better runner than Russ. Obviously, a really prolific athlete. SEC background, so you're looking at really good competition there. I think that the knock on Russ wasn't, he's such an unfinished product. It was that it was 2012, and we didn't yet know that a quarterback who was 5'10" and 5'8" could be that competitive at the pro level.
I think that's true.
Whereas with Jalen, you're like, man, sometimes his decision making is so horrible.
I'm sure it is. This is not the be all end all stat, and I don't mean to like use everything I've got right off the bat in the first segment, but I can't help looking at this. What was Jalen Milroe's completion percentage in college? Off the top of your head, what would you guess it was?
Sub 60?
No.
62?
Higher.
No.
Yeah.
65.
It's about 64.5. It would round up to 65. Okay, so let's call it 65% just for the sake of this conversation. What was Russell Wilson's?
I would have to guess higher.
60.9.
No.
Now, it was higher his last year in Wisconsin. It's a little affected by his time.
What's his last year in Wisconsin?
Almost 73%.
I was going to say, I feel like I remember the argument
But that's coming off of 54.5, 59, 58.5.
54.5. Who are you, Jake Locker?
Yeah, I mean, like,
Go Dogs,
okay, like, that's not even close. So over the course of the career, I know it's not exact.
Sure.
And I'm not trying to say he's a more accurate passer than Russ, but just looking at those numbers, it's pretty significant. What's the other guy he's compared to? Taysom Hill?
Taysom Hill is really more of like what they could do, like Taysom Hill package.
Let's look at Taysom Hill's numbers in college. What was Taysom Hill's completion percentage in college?
58.
58.2.
Whoa.
Nice job, Stacy. 58.2.
What about Lamar? Lamar is who he's drawn a ton of comparisons to, and I think there's been a bit of erasure with Lamar's college.
Lamar Jackson spent 3 seasons playing at Louisville. What was his completion percentage there?
I'm going to say 62.
Sorry, no.
No, lower?
Yeah.
57.
There you go. On the button, 57%. Wow. Now, again, this is not the be-all, end-all. I know there's more. There's touchdown to completion, the touchdown intercept. Sure. Like, there are other things that matter. But before you just write him off, at least let's be clear that he did have some numbers that are kind of awesome, right? Mm-hmm. Like, he's a runner, a legitimate runner. He's not just a legitimate runner. He's like arguably the best runner we've seen since Lamar,
Yes.
right? I mean, like maybe even a better runner
How many?
than
21 rushing touchdowns? No. I think 19 or 20 rushing touchdowns in his final
You want to go
season.
Josh Allen? Josh Allen is like
Josh Allen, I know, is
MVP.
55% college.
He's actually he's 56. Let's give the man let's give the man his props. 56.2%.
That's a D minus.
He was a 56.2% passer at Wyoming, by the way.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
he drew a ton of
not at
comparisons to Jake
Alabama
Walker.
against SEC defenses, at Wyoming against Mountain West defense, or whatever the heck they're in. Like, the guy can do, as far as I can tell, 3 things really well. And the 3 things he does well are the same 3 things Russell Wilson does well. He can run, he can throw the deep ball, and he's accurate on short passes. Like, that sounds like Russell Wilson. That, and he wants to take a belt to anybody who didn't pick him in the draft.
Quote. Mike, I promised you and listeners that I would play you some sound of what John Schneider had to say about Jalen Milroe, and this is, to me, the most fun conversation heading out of day 2 of the draft. So first, what caused the Seahawks to draft Milroe over other quarterbacks?
Well, I mean, we give Ryan Florence and Aaron Heinlein a ton of credit. Those guys did a ton of work on him. It's really hard on those guys to be able to see that, 22 miles an hour or whatever he ran on film or on the field. But he's an incredible athlete. Very, very fast. I think literally it's 21.2 or something like that. His GPS speed, but hard worker. And he's like the William Campbell Award, like academic Heisman Award winner. He's had 4 different offensive coordinators, worked his tail off. His mom's, former Navy, dad's Marine. Like, he came in on a visit. He had a really great visit, and he was in a spot, and he just kept coming, and he was there by himself.
They like a lot about him. What I hear, though, is in addition to praising his physical traits, in particular his speed, they seem to like a lot of the guys they've taken as people, toughness being a common thread.
Well, you can certainly see that running through here, right? The resilience, the toughness, some of those old Pete Carroll traits that I think are still incredibly relevant to John as well. I think that's right. And as a quarterback, I think what's interesting about him is leader, right? Fits in the room. Look, the last 2 starting quarterbacks the Seahawks have had their own very bizarre leadership styles. I'm not going to call either of them bad leaders, but their leadership styles have been fairly unique.
Interesting circumstances around both.
Yeah, right?
Though.
I mean, like, Russ was largely detested by a lot of the people in his locker room.
And just had a different personality.
Very different. Now, there was a lot of good about Russell's leadership. This is not a bash Russ or Gino thing, but let's just all agree that both of them had unique leadership challenges. Gino was very polarizing, especially to his wide receivers. Russ, very polarizing, especially to the Legion of Boom, who thought he was treated differently. Like, both guys had this polarization thing. I don't think you're going to find that with Jalen Milroe.
I don't either. Like,
this is a guy that fits in and tilts the room and leads his people. And I think that there's just a relatable element for him with a lot of the guys who are about to become his teammates.
You know what's really interesting about one of those guys becoming his teammates? Obviously, fellow quarterback Sam Darnold. I don't know that Sam Darnold. I don't see Sam Darnold as a leader, in part because when he came into Minnesota's locker room, he was not. He was not supposed to be. And we asked folks covering the Vikings about his leadership and what that was like, and they were like, "Yeah, I mean, you see that, like, I think Week 14 game, he's
carried off.
It's like you're watching Rudy. I mean, this guy's
being
beloved, lifted up, like just absolutely celebrated. But it took a minute to get there because he came onto the team and kind of initially had to defer to the leaders around him because it wasn't his team. Like, he had to be that, but also to grow into it as the season progressed. So maybe the version Seattle gets is the version that Sam was more comfortable being as the season went on in Minnesota. I would imagine so, because he's being brought in to be the starter in Seattle. In Minnesota, it was a still healthy J.J. McCarthy, and it was prior to the draft, but it was, we're bringing you in as a backup. It's a 1-year deal. It's a low-paid deal. That being said,
do you think they hope that Jalen Milroe wins the job right away? I don't think so. I don't think this is the exact Russ situation where, like, hey, man, you win the job, go for it.
I mean, I think if he does, he does. And John Schneider, you pointed out the Russell Wilson comparison, has shown a willingness to toss aside, hey, I know we spent money on this guy, but if Jalen can ball, he's out there. He's the starter. But I don't think that he'll be ready. I think that'd be hard to imagine.
I'll go back to this was Kalen DeBoer. Brock and I got to talk to Kalen DeBoer, who coached him last year, obviously in Alabama, and asked him kind of about like how long is it going to take this kid?
You get him in whatever role he can, and I think then that's where you make an impact. I equate it kind of like to guys who do special teams, and then all of a sudden that grows their role to maybe being on the field more defensively and offensively. I think that's what you can do with him if that's where he ends up going, is to an organization where, that's the starting point for him.
Right. So there's an opportunity for him to learn a little bit, and specifically, okay, what happens during that time? What does he need to learn?
I think there is growth for him in just, overall pass concepts, reads, and things like that. But the guy pours everything into it. It's just a matter of being comfortable. And I think, you're going to have that balance once in a while when you have someone that's such a great athlete like him. And figure out how you want that and what your offensive system is going to be. The best coordinators, can figure that out. And, you see that with Lamar Jackson and a few other guys, because Jalen has a superpower, and, that's running the football, but he also I think has the capability of being a strong passer as well.
So I'm a little curious, based on that, how Klint Kubiak will handle this. If you do go back to the Russell Wilson era, you'll remember Darrell Bevell was his offensive coordinator, right? Bevell came in here, and I know Bevell has a bad rap, certainly by me and a lot of other folks, for the way he handled the Super Bowl and some other stuff. But before all of that, Darrell Bevell did one of the most important things and positive things in Seahawks history. He ran read option with Russell Wilson and Marshawn Lynch, despite never having run that concept in his career before coming here. He looked at Russ and said, this guy can run. Let's take advantage of his strengths rather than trying to jam a square peg into a round hole and make him run my offense. Let me adapt to him. And if Klint Kubiak can do that with Jalen Milroe, why can't he be successful?
I would also urge people, and this is not me advocating for Sam Darnold like as if I'm Team Sam. I'm team who wins this battle. I'm going to watch both guys. Sam is also a pretty solid fit for Kubiak's offense. I think that
for what it is currently, yes.
For what it is currently, and I think we have this habit as NFL fans to go, oh, Jalen is mobile. Sam, he must be a pocket passer. No, Sam's a pretty solid fit for. He's not like mobile, but he can run what Kubiak wants to do here. To me, the interesting blend is one of Kubiak and what Mike McDonald did in Baltimore. Obviously, he was a defensive coordinator there, but it feels like shades of Baltimore with this draft. Baltimore, coincidentally, having a very good draft as well.
Go figure.
Yeah.
Like always. Right.
Just great players falling to them. And the Eagles. God. But that's not what we're talking about now. To your point, though, I agree. It's a really fascinating challenge for Kubiak. I wonder if it will be two slightly different approaches. You want your backup to be able to plug and play, but what happens when your backup is a guy you're kind of hoping works out long term?
Right.
Then you want to make sure you're planning for him as well.
And is he your backup right away, or is this going to be a third quarterback situation, right, where Drew Lock is your backup for a year?
I was going to throw that question your way.
You keep all three of these guys. Yeah, I think that's a possibility. It doesn't sound like they have any interest in using him in a Cordell Stewart / role where, he comes in and plays wide receiver, tight end right away. Could they use him in spurts? Yes, I think so. Could they use him in short yardage or some stuff like that? Yeah, I would be surprised if they didn't. It would be foolish not to put that kind of speed out there just because he's so gifted as a runner. Like, get him on the field, find a way. But in terms of like actually coming in to be your every down quarterback, it wouldn't surprise me if he's just not. My guess is he's not as polished as Russell Wilson was when you drafted him.
No.
But the goal is that, with that, his running ability is much better than Russ's. Like, if you could get him to a point where he's polished, then it might take a year or two. Okay. What if you have a superstar?
I don't want to say counterpoint by any means, okay? But I will say John Schneider gets knocked fairly for a lack of great offensive lines here in Seattle. You could argue, though, that the best offensive line he ever had was when Russell Wilson was here. And it's kind of this like elephant in the room of when we talk about, Milroe's development here and how soon can he jump into this role. Well, him and Sam are not only going nowhere fast, but you don't want to hinder Milroe's development if your offensive line doesn't take a step forward.
That's a great point. And obviously you took a huge step to address that on Thursday night.